gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson. You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Hey, greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup, where Morgan, Jared, Dives, and Al ruminate on the great and spacious beehive. This week, we have episode 38, December 19th, 2022, coming at you. We have two special guests, Morgan and Jared from My Spiritual Life, co-hosting this week. We've got a lot of news to go over. First of all, President Biden has signed the Respect for Marriage Act. We have artificial intelligence perfectly answering the tough LDS questions that we all have the questions to. You're going to really enjoy that. Mormon missionary has been busted in a child sex solicitation sting operation, and people are searching for Mormon porn, only in the state of Utah, it looks like. And what would you do if the prophet asked you to give up eating vegetables? So yeah, welcome Morgan and Jared. We're so glad to have you, and Dives as well, of course.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm excited. This is going to be a fun time.
You betcha. Hey, this is Dives here. Hey, Morgan and Jared, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. How did you two meet?
We were in the same BDSM dungeon.
No! I always want to answer that first because you're going to say something weird. No.
What's the address? What's the address? I might have been there.
No, we very romantically met at BYU in Book of Mormon class.
Oh, cute.
No, that's quite a contrast.
Yeah. And then 8 months later, we got married.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, fun. Now, when and why did you start My Spiritual Life? When did you start that?
So we got married we met and got married in 2013, and then Jared evilly left the church, and a couple years later, I left the church, and then I guess initially I just felt really lonely, and I kind of wanted to put some thoughts out there to see what other people were thinking, because I just felt kind of crazy, and I started getting a lot of like validation stuff. It was cool. I noticed at the time too, like after leaving the church, a lot of ex-Mormon content wasn't anything I could really stomach, because it was all just really over the top and intense, and like my, for someone like me who still really loved my Mormon family and roots and heritage, I was like, I can't stomach this. So I tried to put content out there that was like a little bit softer, and then I kind of dove into the angry phase. Things got a little more intense, and then I kind of matured a little bit more and kind of calm things down again. So that was kind of the wild ride of that. But more recently on My Spiritual Life, I'm primarily on YouTube. I researched different cults and groups, because obviously I was fascinated with that, coming from this religion where I didn't think it was true anymore. I was like, well, what else is out there? I started researching more cults, and I say cults like, actual cults, because I don't know that Mormonism really can fit that label as well as, Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, things like that. Anyway, so I've enjoyed that aspect of things. I also try to talk to people, have discussions about morality, ethics, right and wrong, how, and just kind of discovering who you are and what you want out of life, as you're navigating, post-faith life. So that's kind of an overview of kind of what I'm doing more now.
Okay. Yeah. And so what would you say your goal is with your, it's not really a podcast, with the YouTube channel? What would you say your goal is? What would you trying to accomplish?
I would say primarily I'm trying to encourage people to think critically and to figure out why they're doing what they're doing, to understand themselves better so that they can live the life that would best fulfill them and make them happy. Because in discovering and understanding yourself, kind of deconstructing your roots, whether they're religious or even just your family roots, you can kind of understand why you're doing what you're doing and maybe why you don't want to be doing what you're doing, and kind of course correct that. So I would hope that people in watching my content would think more critically about the world and about what anyone has to say about anything, whether it's religious or political or whatnot, and that they would look within and understand themselves better.
So it sounds like you take more of a soft-handed approach compared to maybe some of the other ex-Mormon podcasts or YouTube videos that are out there.
I
It's a
don't
bit,
bitch about Brigham Young anymore, if that's what you mean.
yeah, kind of like that, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that statement. Yes.
Yeah, sounds good.
Now, what do you think, Morgan, about the current state of podcasting /YouTube /TikTok, and the fact that it's mostly filled by Jared, Al, myself, a bunch of middle-aged white guys. There's not a lot of women out there.
Well, I think that ultimately men were ordained by God to have ex-Mormon YouTube channels. And so, like, I'm just, I'm kind of going above and beyond, but everyone else that's their ordained duty. So,
Wow. Foreordained. I like to call it predestined.
no, but I guess in my head, personally, I don't really think about what people's genders. I gender blind apparently because I didn't even realize that it was predominantly male until you said that. I'm not. There's some there's some women out there, and like Marty Nilsson, and there's Exmo Lex, and there's I don't know. There's a handful, but I mean,
Yeah, there are a
ultimately,
handful.
ultimately, to me, I don't know why that might be the case, but I guess it doesn't necessarily bother me. I haven't thought about it, but Jared might have some comments on that.
I don't know. I like to look at the content, not the identity of the content creator, right? Because I don't know, when I left it, like some of the ones that I listened to the most, there was Lindsay Hansen Park and Jonathan Streeter, right? And I loved the Europolygamy podcast, and everybody loved that. I don't know. We get into arguments all the time in these spaces about whether or not there's sexism in the ex-Mormon podcast community because there's generally more men doing it or whatever. But like, I don't know. I don't think it's the case that people will refuse to listen to a podcaster just because she's a woman, right? Because Lindsay Henson Park's a good example. She's one of the most popular ex-Mormon podcasters out there, and she did a really good job. Exmo Lex is huge. I don't know. I think there's just more men. I don't know. I would say more men must be interested in it.
More women are interested in cooking, probably.
Oh man!
Right.
Now I just looked at our stats for this podcast, and I just pulled them up while you were talking. And 61% of our audience is male, so maybe we're fitting that same mold. I do wonder. Is there anything else about you, Jared or Morgan, your personal life or religious background that you want to share with us before we get started? We did link to My Spiritual Life on YouTube, but is there anything else about your backgrounds that you want to talk about before we jump in the news?
Jared also does some videos with Chris Hanna over on, what do you call it?
Porch Time.
Porch Time. If people want to see more from Jared comes on my channel occasionally, but that's where you can see more of him getting I don't know, real fired up. Yeah. So,
well, what do you cover? What do you cover over there on that channel? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that.
Covers how much he hates ex-Mormons. Wow. I actually think you guys would like it.
That's Porch Time on YouTube.
Yeah, it's Chris Hanna's channel. It's me and Flip and
oh
Chris.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that channel before. Now that I didn't recognize you. Now, yes, I've watched that channel from time to time. You guys kind of go off the deep end sometimes on that one, don't you?
Yeah, we get. Yeah, I don't know. So that's, if you ask about the state of ex-Mormon podcasting, then I guess my opinions are all on that channel.
Yeah, so if it's a channel to roast ex-Mormons, then you must have a lot of faithful. You probably have a lot of general authorities tuning into that channel. That's all I can imagine.
I don't think they would.
Bednar listens to it every morning. I have it on a very reputable source.
Honestly, the amount of people who I don't know, the amount of people who would approve of what we do is pretty low. There's like, I don't know, maybe 20 people think this same way. So, because we're not really going to make friends with most of the Mormon community because we're obnoxious. We don't let them off the hook. We cuss constantly, and
they've covenanted to avoid loud laughter. So
yeah.
True.
Well, don't cut yourself short. The church started in April 6th, 1830, and it had less than 50 members. So if you've only got 20 people tuning in, you never know what's going to happen, Jared.
Oh my God, Jared, you could reach the whole world.
I could.
You might even build your own temple in Dubois.
I know. How do you feel about 20 other wives?
I mean, do I get extra
and it begins.
Yeah. Well, I think you've been listening a little bit too much to the Year of Polygamy podcast, Jared. It's starting to go straight to your head. So you may need to back off that a little bit. And no, seriously. But though you have we want to thank you so much for coming on. But Morgan, we always have a Mormon News Roundup joke of the week. And Morgan, I understand that you've got the joke this week.
Yes, I do. So we used to do this series on our channel called Cringe Binge, and we don't do it anymore. But people would write in with just these funny, cringy moments that they had as LDS or other religious, faith-based stories. And my favorite story ever. This girl wrote in and talked about how her grandma had a hummingbird die in her garden, and she took that hummingbird. Do you want to finish the story, Drew?
I mean, she put it in a plastic bag, and it was like her reverse canary in the coal mine, because it was like a dead bird that when Jesus comes again, she expected it to be resurrected.
Oh,
so she'd be fluttering around in that bag.
So she put it.
She'd be the first to know that Jesus is back.
She put this dead hummingbird in a Ziploc bag, taped it to the outside of her window, and would use it to check if it was the second coming every morning.
I love it.
Wow.
But one thing she doesn't know is that hummingbirds need oxygen to survive, so she just ended up killing it again.
It would just keep dying and being
respawned.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is a Mormon pickup line that I came up with all by myself that I got on Morgan.
And you're going to use that for those 20 wives, or is that just...
Oh, okay,
well,
gotcha. It wouldn't work
the first time
because it would. I don't know. It was just, if I were a polygamist, I'd marry you twice.
That's sweet.
That's very romantic.
Probably wouldn't work on additional wives.
Probably not.
No, probably not. But speaking of polygamy, though, our first news article does talk about marriage a lot, and that's from Tad Welch on Deseret News. And President Biden here, he is signing the Amended Respect for Marriage Act in White House ceremony, and Latter-day Saint leaders, they are attending the ceremony, and the church also released a statement on this, and they sent two indomitable guests. For the signing ceremony. The church sent former Senator Gordon H. Smith from Oregon. He's a former senator. And also Elder Jack and Gerard, a General Authority 70 of the church. So, hey, the church is releasing a statement. They're attending the ceremony. They're really they're really rolling out the red carpet for this, right, guys?
Official representatives from the church, huh?
I imagine there's this, there's stark balance that you got to walk when you are the church PR team,
True.
right? You don't want to send nobody, because then that's, I don't know, that looks like Trump not coming to the inauguration. We're not doing it. But you got to send. You don't want to send the prophet, because then you're, I don't know, your more traditional Mormon members are going to be like, what the hell, man? What the heck, man?
Yeah.
I went to a call center and called people in California and told them to vote against Prop 8 because you told me to 20 years ago, and now you're going to this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, the church didn't want to send anyone too high because then it would give it too much, it'd be like you're giving too big of an endorsement. So they gave the most tepid endorsement that you could. I mean, it's kind of like you had the second counselor in the Twila Elders Quorum presidency is going to, I mean, it's just a former.
I think it was very
senator.
calculated. I think you're right.
Yeah. I'm guessing that this 70 isn't from the first two quorums of the 70, probably one of the third or fourth.
Ew.
Yeah, he could be from the he could be from the 9th or 12th. Who knows?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
for
not
real,
really sure. But the church, the church did release a statement, and they said that this new law demonstrates respect for others, and the law states that it can't be used to harm religious conscience rights or faith-based institutions, and it protects the tax-exempt status of churches. It protects grants and licenses. No law is perfect, but basically, we're a big fan of this law. Thanks so much. What do y'all think about that?
I don't
It's
know.
not perfect, but at least they got what they wanted, right?
Yeah, I don't even know if they'll get what they wanted, though.
I think that the only reason that they said it's not perfect was to have plausible deniability.
Yeah.
I think just everything that the church does at this point is risk-averse business practices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they restated in this statement again that the doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints related to marriage between a man and a woman is well known and will remain unchanged. They seem to be coming back to this point time and time again, but then you have a bill that seemingly says the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, that was the big thing when it broke, right?
Yeah.
The big news our title when it broke was, the LDS Church endorses gay marriage, and we find that that's just kind of one thing that they weren't able to get written out of the bill.
I had some LDS, family members that were really shook up over this because they were like, why couldn't the church just have said nothing, And I understand where they're coming from because it is so contradictory to the stance that the church has taken in the past that it was putting a friend of mine, an LDS friend of mine, through basically a faith crisis.
Yeah.
I don't blame her. Part of me wonders if the reason to advocate for this was in part to pander, because my understanding is that they're losing a lot of members over the LGBT stuff, and so if they can be like, okay, well, no, we're not hateful toward this group, okay, look, here's proof, they think maybe it will hold some membership, but I don't know.
So granting concession that will allow people that are non-binary to marry legally, but just not in our temples, not in our church houses, but yeah, they can marry. They just yeah.
Not in my backyard. The thing about this statement is that this statement, you're going to lose the right-wing members. The Desnats and the other people who are far out on the right. This statement is going to make them mad. So it's like you can't have a statement now. The church, it's a fine line to walk, and the church has alienated so many of the left-leaning church members with prior LGBTQ rhetoric, which was very harmful. And now it's managed to alienate all the way those on the right.
It is kind of funny. You think, like, why not stand by your more conservative members since you've already burned the bridge with the liberal members? So, like, why would you piss off your conservative members? And I can't sit here and think that this wasn't just some kind of oopsie moment. I'm sure that this was very calculated, that the way they went about this. And I'm not entirely sure what they were trying to accomplish. But I think that they have successfully accomplished pissing off both the young, liberal, Mormons and the older conservative ones now. So I'm not sure, who's going to stick around.
I don't know. If they had been articulate about this at all, then I think I could have given them a pat on the back for it. Like, because I remember my stance on it when I was, very Mormon. I couldn't understand how you could, like, constitutionally speaking, make gay marriage illegal, right? Like, even as a believing Mormon, I was like, well, no, it should be legal. I'm Mormon. I think it's a sin, but I don't legislate sin. Obviously, I'm not going to make coffee or alcohol illegal. So why would I make this illegal? So if they said that, and if they just said, look, we still think it's a sin, but it should be legal. And I do, like, honestly, I think it's fair to say, and we don't want to do it in our temples. Like, that's fine. Don't do it in your temple. Why would a gay couple want to get married in your temple anyway?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think the real point was that the church was saying, okay, well, legally they can, but also legally we can deny them access to our sacred shrines and altars.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to be watching this. It's just amazing that this has managed to upset so many people, and it does seem very calculated. And I would have expected to see Dallin H. Oaks at this, because this is a law that certainly he must have been the brainchild for this entire endeavor. I mean, I don't think anybody questions that. So we'll be watching this. We could spend a lot more time on this if we could. We've got a lot of news to get to, so please rate us with 5 stars if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, by the way. And we'll be watching this. Our next article here is the title of the article is Mormon Church Plans First Middle East Temple Near the City of Dubai. And this was released on the nationalnews.com, which is a United Arab Emirates newspaper. So hundreds of members of the church are in Dubai. Up to maybe 2,000 members are in Dubai. There is a stake there. And the church has announced that they're the only temple that is going to be built in the entire Middle East. They're going to be building it in the Expo City in Dubai. Now, this temple was announced in 2020, and the building, it takes about 3 to 4 years to make a temple. And of course, there's like 170 operating temples in the world. But this is going to be the first temple in the entire Middle East that the church has that the church is a part of.
I'm curious to know if this is the first church or the first temple that the church is building to serve just one stake of 2,000 members.
No, I can definitely answer that. For instance, the church has one stake in India. There's only one stake in India. There's 36 congregations in India, and for 1.4 billion people in India, there is one announced temple. Of course, there's like 2 temples in. There's like 3 temples in Cache Valley. You know what I mean? So yes, the church, and like Austria has 4,000 members. They're all in one stake. So there are a number of temples that are just for one stake. So yes, I can answer that.
Wow. Yeah.
But if you think about this, so there's 2,000 members in Dubai. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of temple tourism to this temple. I mean, it's pretty hard to travel around to some of these Middle East countries. I mean, there could be, but if you have 2,000 members in Dubai, let's say that half of them are active, which is a pretty generous estimate. That'd be 1,000 members in 1,000 Mormons in Dubai. Well, only 3/4 of those can really go into the temple, because you don't really have 11-year-olds going into the temple. So we're down to 750, and only 75% of those actually have a temple recommend. So we're down to like 500, and out of that, only like maybe 75% of them actually go to the temple. So this is a temple that is basically going to be built for like maybe 300 or 400 people. It's a very small number.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how often they'll even be open. Like, who's going to staff it?
Well, not everyone would live super close to it either, like out of all those people. So
sure, but the people that staff it would have to, you think, live close to it.
Well, and I wonder how. Yeah, that's. They wouldn't. They maybe they could staff it once a month.
Yeah.
I don't imagine.
This is a big deal for LDS members, as far as like it's that whole prophecy that the church is going to go and fill the whole earth. That's a big deal, for LDS people, because having a temple here in this place where you think maybe it wouldn't happen, or at least not happen for a lot longer. I'm sure that a lot of Mormons are excited about it, just for the, I don't know, kind of like a token temple.
Okay, I think it better look cool. It better look damn cool, because like for the last 20 years, we've had these Hinckley McTemple things that they've put up.
McTemples, like McBurgers.
Yeah, like they're factory temples. It's like they have just this blueprint that they printed off. I don't know, and then they did every temple like that, and they look dumb. They don't have any more San Diego temples or whatever. It's just this crap. So if you're going to do one, it's their first temple in the Middle East, then make it look pretty.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do it justice. I mean, it's next to like the Burj Dubai. I mean, it's in the Expo Center. It's got to be unique. It has to also, in my mind, it needs to have like Middle Eastern like hints in it, some kind of an architecture that is like, it can't just be, like if you put a Provo temple in there, that's it. I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out.
They should demolish that's one of the ugliest buildings I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. If there's going to be a single spire, it better be over 300 feet tall, right?
Yeah. The Provo Temple is being renovated. The Provo Temple is set to be renovated. They haven't released what the new what it's going to look like, but obviously it can't be much worse than what it currently is.
Doing it again?
Yeah.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
They're redoing it.
Third time's a charm.
Hey everybody, it's D-Vase here. Thanks so much for listening to the Mormon News Roundup. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Allow me to explain. Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Signature Books, www.signaturebooks.com. We invite you to check out their latest book written by Romney Burke, which is entitled Susie Young Gates, Daughter of Mormonism.
Brigham Young had over 50 wives and 56 children, but none has better name recognition than daughter Susie Young Gates. She lived from 1856 and died in 1933. Yet she, like so many women of Mormonism's past, has remained a mystery to most church members. In Susie Young Gates, Romney Burke, the author, paints a portrait of a strong woman who rose to prominence within the church, fought for the rights of women throughout the country, yet dealt with personal trials and her share of heartbreak.
Yep. Now, that does take us to our next article here, which you've got for us, right, Al?
I do. This one is, we're going a little bit with the sports this week. Latter-day Saint head football coach Ken Niumatalolo steps down at Navy. So he was, he gained fame in the 2014 Meet the Mormons film as the head coach of Navy football team. Had a really good career. This article comes from the Deseret News. They're reporting on it. From, Ryan McDonald, December 11th of this year. And we don't really know why he's stepping down, but he's had a very good, long career, a very distinguished career with Navy. He went as an assistant coach for a time to UNLV, but then he went right back to Navy and became the head coach. They did consider him as Lavelle Edwards' replacement, or not Lavelle Edwards, Mendenhall. Yeah, Sataki is the one that they gave the position to, but he was in the running as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so Sataki, he got the after Mendenhall, and this is so he's been with Navy ever since, and he's still fairly young for retirement, so it doesn't look like he's. I mean, he's been in there for 25 years of service at the Naval Academy. But he's still a fairly young guy, so for him to be retiring at such a young age, we're not really sure what the future has or why he's 57 years old, so
maybe God called him to be in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach mission.
That's a possibility. That's certainly a possibility.
That sounds like a good mission. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach mission. That's pretty good.
Somebody's got to do it.
I'm going to tell you, it'll probably be very hard to find sister missionaries that would meet the cheerleader requirement. I might have to cut that.
Yep.
I might have to cut that out. That's rude. That was below the belt. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just a joke.
They are allowed to wear pants now, right? So,
but not shorts. Shorts.
Yeah.
But he was in Meet the Mormons. He was one of the stars there, and it was a very faith-inspiring story, really, when you watch the behind the scenes and the other things from 2014. He's got an incredible family, an incredible story. And, when he went to Navy, he refused to have football meetings on Sunday. And that was pretty groundbreaking at the time because, usually your last game's on Saturday, you go back in to review the film. And he said, no, the Sunday's a holy day and we're not going to do it. And that was considered very controversial. His life story, his family story is very faith inspiring. He seems like a really good person at least from the film, from what he's portrayed in the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a really decent guy.
Yeah, and I do just want to touch on real quick BYU football. They did win their bowl game yesterday versus in the New Mexico Bowl versus Southern Methodist University. So BYU ends up the season on 8-5. So that's yeah, you bet. That's our sports update. Now our next article here. This is unbelievable. This is really, really ridiculous. Is Mormon missionary caught on camera sexually soliciting an 11-year-old girl in front of his missionary companion, and the police are called. This is a terribly sad story. Morgan, we talked about this in the pre-show. What are your thoughts on this incredibly outrageous story?
So for anyone who might not be familiar with this, there are Chris Hansen wannabes, I'll call them. So, okay,
Good name. Yep.
years ago, Chris Hansen hosted a show on Dateline that was called To Catch a Predator. And a lot of people have basically mimicked that and made YouTube channels where they pretend to be a minor child and, wait for, people to reach out to them, and so that they can have this gotcha journalism moment where they go confront those people and say, why were you, trying to solicit sex or photos from this underage person? And I personally, I really liked the show Catch a Predator when it came out, but more recently, as I've seen these YouTubers and stuff come out, I've kind of my opinions on it have changed a lot because I don't think that it's ethical. The way that I see it is that if you are attracted to an underage child, you're mentally ill and you need help. And so I think that getting a camera in these people's faces and trying to exploit them and their vulnerability and their illness for views is extremely unethical, in my opinion. However, the video certainly is very interesting because they just so happened in their little detective work to catch an LDS Mormon missionary who was, serving a mission during this time that he was soliciting this, fake young girl for sex. So this guy comes and confronts. So the host of the YouTube channel goes and confronts this missionary. He lies, by the way, to get onto the premise of the apartment complex, says that he has a package and he doesn't. He shows up.
This guy really he breaks every ethical boundary in order to get access to the missionary, and then in the process of talking with him, right?
Yeah, his name's Alex. His name is Alex Rosen. He supposedly has a YouTube channel called Predatory Poachers, and he also has an organization that he's a part of called Nonviolent Citizens Against Predators. So he's the one who recorded the call and the text messages and basically laid the trap for this missionary.
Yeah, and basically the it's like a 40-minute long video, but essentially this host, what he does is just interrogates this young missionary and is like, why did you do this? Did you do this? Why did you do it? Did you? But did you really? It was like 40 minutes of that.
The companion sitting there actually called it right when he's like, okay, what do you want to happen from this? And the guy's like, I want some assurance that it's not going to happen again. And he's like, look, I don't think you will accept any form of assurance that this isn't going to happen again. And I think he nailed it. Because, like, what are you going to say? Like, oh, I promise I'm not going to go solicit 11-year-olds anymore. And be like, okay, that's fair. See ya. Like, you're just going to trust this guy?
So he kept pushing him. Obviously, the missionary was horrified, ashamed, and, this was an awkward situation for him. Not saying, like, that what he did was okay. What he did was terrible. But obviously, like, what are you supposed to do in this situation? I have no idea. Clearly, this kid needs help. But the host just kept pushing him, and then the companion was trying to get them to leave and be like, okay, like, we're gonna address this. Oh, not to mention the host lied and said that he was Mormon, that wasn't true.
Oh yeah.
He was trying to get this kid to talk.
Yeah, but the biggest lie that he told was that he was 27 years old. He said,
I think the biggest lie that he told was that he was an 11-year-old girl. So before the cameras even started rolling, right? Because I mean, that's the question I have: is there a crime actually committed in this? Because it's not like he was actually talking to an 11-year-old girl. Sure, maybe he thought he was talking to an 11-year-old girl, but I mean, with regards to like laws about deception and fraud and things like that, I would think that Alex Rosen has committed more crimes in this process than the missionary did.
Well, that's one of the big problems here is that they call law enforcement in on this case and other cases. And the problem is that the text messages from Mr. Rosen and the phone calls and the recordings, they're not the same as if this was being done by the FBI or a law enforcement agency. Yep. And a lot of times they don't get the convictions that they were looking for. This is all basically a publicity stunt in an effort to try to get likes and comments on YouTube, and a lot of times nothing ends up happening.
So essentially, this is like a more sinister version of like the prank videos where they're like, "Oh, it's just a prank, bro."
I think it's kind of just this. It always seems to be this self-aggrandizement that they're after. I think.
Yeah.
I don't. I've watched a couple of these channels, and it's because he even at the end of it, after the police took the companion away and were talking to him, he's like chastising the companion. This main guy here, he's like this is on you and blah blah. I don't know. Like it's almost like he wanted to lecture people more than anything. I think we have this sort of bloodlust in us that we seek to direct toward things that we deem worthy of that bloodlust. Because like when you go, I remember watching this documentary on Ted Bundy, and when he was in court, you see all these people with signs outside that read "Burn Bundy, burn," right? And like all these people calling for somebody's death, and Ted Bundy was about as bad as you get. And like I would say that if anyone's deserving of the death penalty, then yeah, but my God, it ought to be a really solemn occasion when you sentence somebody to death. I think when ordinary people get off on somebody being sentenced to death, they're like, you're just looking for something that will quench that bloodlust that you haven't addressed inside you.
Is this a good time to bring up the fact that Ted Bundy is a Mormon?
Fair enough.
It's a very good one.
Yeah, not a good one. The thing about it is that, you're right about what you said, Jared. People want to see people that they don't like in uncomfortable situations. And quite frankly, Mormon missionaries are among the least liked people around. They are considered automatons. People don't want them on their porch. Mormonism is weird. It's like they don't even have feelings. So this is going to get a lot more views than the average because of also the hypocrisy factor. They're supposed to be spreading God's good word. And instead, this missionary makes a bad mistake. It's going to lead to a lot of likes and a lot of comments.
I guess the issue I take with this whole process, going back to what Morgan was saying earlier, is essentially what we're taking is a mentally ill person and exploiting their mental illness. So could this possibly lead into other people like hanging around outside of mental health clinics, looking for like people with OCD and say, "Oh, look at you! You can't control going outside the house without flipping the lights on and off 5 times." At what point do we call this out for what it really is? And that's something that's a problem, right?
Yeah, I would like to think that we would think that people who are hurting people, like, oftentimes themselves are mentally ill and that they need help. They don't need to be this money-making grab, I find that so unethical. And again, not to say that it was right what this kid did. It was scary what he did. And it's scary what he might do in the future, but that putting it on YouTube isn't going to fix anything. And some people could steelman that and say like, well, maybe if it shamed him enough, he won't try it again. But I think that shame is only something that often works temporarily. But I mean, you could make a case for it. But essentially, I just think that as humans, like, we're all saying, as humans, it's in our nature to want that vengeful, to want that revenge on people that have done something wrong. We think, oh yeah, this bad thing's happening, this bad person feels so good. And it's like, wait a second, is that really the kind of person I want to be, that I wish harm upon people that have done harm? Because that's literally the eye for eye makes the world go blind. Like, no, if people are doing harm and we need to lock them up so they stop doing it and hopefully learn from the lesson, great. But like, I don't like this YouTube fame and clout that people can get in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, let's get these people some help instead of public shaming them, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that does bring us to our Mormon News Roundup question of the week. If you come on over to Anchor, you can interact with us on our question of the week. And the question is, are vigilante-led sexual predator entrapment groups doing more good than harm? We also have a website. It's www.mormonnewsroundup.com or .org. We bought both of the domains. Or you can send us an email to kolob@mormonnewsroundup.org. We'd love to know your thoughts on this last article. And that does, Jared, you've got our next article, and this is quite a doozy.
Okay, well, this is horrifying. So Pornhub every year releases the most searched for thing on their site by state each year. And so it's concerning because I think we need to bring back, good old fashioned traditional porn. Like, I don't see a single one that's just blowjob. Like, how come nobody's looking that up?
Or missionary position.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned, by the way, as an Idahoan, because
just like Grandma used to make.
Ours is hentai, and then our neighbors over there in Washington are furry.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? But the big concern here is Utah. Utah decided Mormon ought to be a search term. And I remember when I first left the church, people on the ex-Mormon subreddit would joke around about the Mormon Girls site. That's like, it's a Mormon woman. It's Mormon porn type thing. And so obviously I immediately looked it up. And
Jared!
It is unsettling. They're like wearing temple clothes.
Oh no!
They're like,
wow!
Like, I'm being interviewed by the bishop, and I'll do anything for repentance, bishop. And like, oh God,
no!
This is stuff we complain about on the ex-Mormon subreddit.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's so hot how he abuses his power.
Well, I do like at least that my state has a pretty decent term, and it's smoking. Like, I guess, like smoking hot. I mean, at least we don't have an embarrassing term. There's a lot of embarrassing search terms out there, and I'd like to say that Virginia has a pretty decent term, smoking. I think that's not too bad, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a lot better than Illinois with dirty talk. Yeah.
Watch it.
I know, yeah.
We're going to get an explicit rating on this.
Yeah.
Dirty talk's probably better than Kentucky's stepmom.
That too, yeah.
This does it does prove to me that Russell M. Nelson does have prophetic abilities, because I think he's totally vindicated, because it looks like the word Mormon really is a victory for Satan.
It is on YouPorn or whatever, Pornhub, yeah.
Yeah,
Pornhub
it does look like
already a victory for Satan, so this is just a double victory for Satan.
Double victory. I would have thought, honestly, that the most porn word in Utah that was like Utah specific would have been like polygamy. I don't really know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was definitely not expecting the word Mormon.
Kind of alarming.
Those videos are also very unsettling.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I'm sure they are.
But luckily, your senator, Al, he has come to the rescue. Right after this was released, your senator, he says he's going to solve this entire problem for us. What is he going to do? He
wants to ban all porn, because the alcohol will fix it. The old abstinence form of birth control. Yep. This will fix everything.
Yeah, so he introduced the Interstate Obescency Definition Act, IODA, and it would establish a national definition of obscenity, which would, in effect, outlaw all online sexual content nationwide. So Mike Lee is going to try to fix this problem of the Utah word Pornhub search term for Mormon, and he's just going to make it off limits for everyone.
Yeah, and I think his next plan is to ban swimming so nobody drowns anymore, too.
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know what to think about that as a premise, because, well, just because you think something's wrong doesn't mean it's always good to outlaw it,
Well, we discussed this before, that, the world would probably be better off without internet porn. Like, if it just could go away, probably be better off. We'd also be better off if alcohol just went away, or cigarettes just went away. But illegalizing them is just a terrible strategy.
Yeah, all it does is
all the porn stars that are now jobless. What have you done?
Well, AI is going to take care of that soon. We're going to have.
My God!
I'm just going to be able to type in Audrey Hepburn and Marilyn Monroe double teaming Jared, and I'm going to get like a personalized video.
Well, it sounds like, Jared, that you're a real subject matter expert in all of this, by the way.
You're a very forward-thinking guy. I think that might be
okay.
Yeah.
I saw internet porn when I was in second grade. I know how this works. I don't want to be an expert, but I am. Okay, get off my back.
Okay. Well, we're not your bishop, so hey, that's none of our business. But
I'll talk to him though.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, you talked about AI, and that's funny that you mentioned that because AI is all in the rage these days. And in fact, somebody, the new AI out there is called Chat GPT, and you can go into there and you can type in almost any question, and the AI will give you its response. And somebody went in there and typed in, "Hey, I'd like to hi to Kolob." You know, like that old hymn, "If you could hi to Kolob," and he said to the Chat GPT, "How can I hi to Kolob?" And Al, what did the AI say about getting to Kolob?
Let me open that one up because it is precious.
Yeah, basically, while you're opening that up, he says that Kolob is a term from the Book of Mormon, a religious text that is considered sacred by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in the book, Kolob is described as a star or a planet that's near to the throne of God. But here's the most important part. It is not possible to physically travel to Kolob, as it is a fictional place that exists only in the religious beliefs of Mormons.
That's right.
How does it know all this?
Well, it's not stupid. It's not artificial stupid. It's artificial intelligence. So that's going to give you a straight, very uncomfortable answer.
Look, that artificial intelligence is going to be artificially blushing when we discover Kolob.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, well, that's what the James Webb telescope. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're fine. I was just going to say, I think Satan probably was the one that told the artificial intelligence that it's fictitious. So.
Major victory for Satan. You know, the James Webb telescope, as soon as that was starting to bring back those images, there was a lot of memes out there with people saying, "Hey, we finally found Kolob," and they put the little dot on the Kolob, you know?
Mm-hmm. Which is why artificial intelligence ought to just be used for genealogy, right?
Now, speaking of what the response was, it actually the text message I saw or the screenshot said that it said that Kolob was from the Book of Mormon, which technically is not accurate because Kolob is not in the Book of Mormon. It's actually in the Pearl of Great Price, specifically the Book of Abraham. But when I went to the Chat GPT, it had actually fixed that, and it said that Kolob was from the Book of Abraham. So between the time that somebody posted it and the time that I tested it, it had actually learned the correct origin of the word Kolob. So I mean, AI. It is able to easily answer some of the most difficult gospel questions, and that's pretty scary.
Good heavens, it's learning.
Now, we just need to feed it the questions in the CES letter, and that's all we need to do. It's going to be able to answer those with ease.
That would be a fun project. I know what I'm doing this afternoon.
Coming up next week, AI debunks the CES letter.
Well, it was able to easily do it with Kolob. And in fact, somebody actually went to the same AI and said, "Hey, would you please give me a patriarchal blessing?" So a patriarchal blessing in the church is where you go to usually an older male. He puts his hands on your head and he gives you a special blessing. It's kind of like being able to tell you your potential in life. And Morgan and Jared, what happened when you asked the ChatGPT for a patriarchal blessing? What happened?
Here's what it says.
Well, it said, "Dear Sister Higdon, as a patriarch in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it is my privilege to give you a patriarchal blessing. This blessing is given by the laying on of hands and is inspired by God. In this blessing, you are promised that God will guide and direct you in your life. He will bless you with the gifts and abilities that you need to fulfill your divine potential. You are a child of God, and He loves you and cares for you. You have been called to serve in a special way in His kingdom. As you are obedient to His commandments and keep His covenants, you will be blessed with spiritual strength, wisdom, and understanding. You are of the house of Israel." Almost, buddy. That's not quite there, and have been given a special heritage and lineage. You are a descendant of ancestor and have a special role to play in furthering the work of the Lord. May you always remember your divine heritage, and may you live in such a way that you are worthy to receive the blessings of the Lord. May you always seek to do His will, and may you find joy and fulfillment in this life and in the life to come. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
So how accurate is that, Morgan?
I think it was more accurate than my actual patriarchal blessing.
I was just going to say, it's like they just copy and pasted mine on there.
I know, it is spot on. It's scary. And I couldn't believe how it had that little cutoff section where it said insert ancestor here.
Yeah.
Like That was wild. And I mean, yeah, it was spot on.
Yeah,
That's
I'd say
creepy.
the only thing it got wrong was saying you are of the house of Israel. But other than that, like the language was spot on.
Yeah.
It even capitalized his when it was talking about God.
And the length was pretty spot on too.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing, it has a blank there for the word ancestor because the chat knows, the AI knows that there's some person that gets put in there. They're not exactly sure, Manassas. It's probably pulling a lot of different things. It knows that some ancestor is supposed to go in there, so they're just leaving that as a blank. I mean, it is uncannily accurate.
Gosh, that's so cool. That's so interesting.
Yeah, and so I was messing around with it. I was like, man, if you can, he seems like it can easily answer questions about Kolob. It can give patriarchal blessings. So I was in there and I was going in there and messing around with it. And I asked it, I said, this is one of the most difficult gospel questions, at least for me. And is the word Mormon a victory for Satan? Because that's a pretty controversial question. There's a lot of people, we had Rick Bennett on last week, and we even had Jim Bennett the week before. None of them think that it's a victory for Satan, although a lot of members of the church do think that it is a victory for Satan. So, Al, when we put it into the chat, what did we get? Is the word Mormon actually a victory for Satan?
Well, the very first sentence of its response is saying that the word Mormon is not a victory for Satan.
Oh.
The word Mormon comes from the Book of Mormon, which is sacred text of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the LDS, or Mormon Church. He is really not following the prophet there, is he?
Oh.
The Book of Mormon is named after the prophet Mormon, who compiled the book from earlier records as the ancient inhabitants of the Americas.
Oh my God!
This is, it's almost like artificial intelligence is not bound to follow the teachings of the Latter-day Prophets.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, basically, AI, it believes that Kolob is a made-up place that no one can visit. It gives a near-perfect patriarchal blessing, and it knows that the word Mormon is really not a major victory for Satan. I mean, you want to talk about accuracy? Wow. I'm impressed.
Well, sure, but it hasn't received the gift of the artificial Holy Ghost yet, so otherwise, we know that.
Yeah. The question is, just because it can give patriarchal blessings, I mean, does it really have the authority?
No, it doesn't.
And well, I don't know. I'm starting to think that this thing is smarter than most members and maybe even some of the leadership. So maybe the AI should be the next prophet.
Yeah, it's accurate. It's spot on.
Yeah, but can it translate Reformed Egyptian? That's the real question.
That's the test.
I doubt it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it can do almost anything. It's pretty incredible. In fact, I actually put in one more prompt in here because I just find it to be endlessly fascinating. I said, hey, AI, will you please tell me a Mormon joke? But it said, no, I'm sorry. I'm not programmed to tell jokes that may offend or be inappropriate for certain audiences. It is important to be respectful and considerate of others' beliefs and feelings. So, I mean, it is even politically correct. It knows all about Kolob. It gives perfect patriarchal blessings. It knows the word Mormon is really not a major victory for Satan, but it's still sensitive to my own personal feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this thing's diplomatic.
Yeah, I mean, is it on Grindr or? I mean, I need to know these things. I mean,
the funny part is, anytime in the past they've tried to roll out one of these artificial intelligent chatbots, it's immediately flooded by 4chan people who they do everything they can to try to make it racist and stuff like that. So, so now every new chatbot they have to put parameters like you will not tell sexist jokes. You will.
And it doesn't want to offend Mormons. So I thought I was very impressed by that. So, if you can drop us a like, drop us a subscription, we'd be grateful, very, very grateful. We also have some bonus content that we put along with this episode up on our Patreon site. If you go over there, you can get some bonus content that goes along with this particular podcast episode. And that does take us to our final article of the week, which, Morgan, you got this one for us, right?
Yes. So Jeremy Goff, I think that's how you say it. He's a blogger. He's got a blog called My Life by Go Off, play on his last name. He wrote an article on December 11th of 2022. What would you do if the prophet asked you to stop eating vegetables?
Leave the church.
You said leave the church, Jared?
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me? I'm from Idaho. Potato is like 40% of my diet.
We have potatoes
as a matter of
in
fact,
our backyard. It's Idaho law. You have to have them. So
Now
just
that
as
you-
an overview. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Now that you mention it, I don't think President Benson would ever ask somebody like that since he was so into agriculture.
Yeah.
He definitely wouldn't do that. Okay, sorry to go ahead, Morgan. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. So I wanted to read this opening line. What if today the prophet held an official church press release and asked members to stop eating vegetables? How would you react? What would you do? Would you pray for confirmation that it's the will of the Lord? What if that answer didn't come immediately? What if it took a year or 10 years to get an answer? And what would you do in the meantime? And then he covers 3 points in his article. First, the prophet cannot lead us astray. Second, fallen prophets are false doctrine. Third, it is not blind obedience to be a faithful witness. And then I just wanted to read this last part of the toward the end of the article. Returning to the vegetables. If the prophet told us to stop eating vegetables, those who are valiantly adhering to the principles of the Lord's principles of the Lord's way of following the prophet would simply not eat the veggies. They would be true to what they know. Even if they had questions or unanswered prayers, they would remain true. They understand the truth of President N. Eldon Tanner's statement when the prophet, and this is a quote, when the prophet speaks, the debate is over. And that was from a 1979 talk that he's referencing. And then this last line, but those saints who do not accept the underlying principle of the Lord's way of following the prophet will waver and fall.
It's kind of funny because he says blind. I think they just need to embrace the term blind obedience, because he basically says right there, it's not blind obedience to obey literally everything that the prophet ever tells you to do. But it kind of is. You're just like, he's asking you to not eat vegetables anymore, which is not like, he's not even giving you a reason. He's just saying do it, and you're like, all right, I'll do that, even though I don't know why. That is blind obedience. You clearly think it's a good thing, though, so just embrace it and be like, I'm up for blind obedience. Don't just constantly be blindly obedient and then claim that, that's not what we're doing.
Exactly, Jared.
My two thoughts with this. First, it's funny to me that, okay, so he brings up the prophet can't lead us astray. And to prove that, he has quotes from prophets that tell you, like, okay, we cannot, we cannot lead you astray, says we. Like, and then it's funny too that he used the vegetable example, because he didn't use an example like something more vague, like, what would you do if the prophet asked you to go climb up on your roof every morning and shout, something like it wasn't even something weird. It's like something that that your body needs, like, and if you should just turn away from that if the prophet asks you to do so. It's a weird analogy that he set up, knowing that, like, this is something that is vital to your health as a human being. It's strange.
Well, if you really wanted to get a good question, ask them what they would do if the prophet told them to do something that they knew to be immoral.
Yeah, let's get into that here in a little bit, because I think that's kind of an easy question. That stop eating vegetables, it seems kind of small, seems kind of silly, but it does seem. The article says that what if the prophet held a press release? The prophet doesn't even hold a major press release for the major changes in church policy that we just had with the Marriage for All Act. He's not going to hold a press conference for veggies, I can tell you that. But there's a lot of things that the church has asked the members to do, which are pretty easy, which I would consider easy. For instance, coffee. That's technically a fruit. Grain, types of barley is off limits if it's interacted with yeast. And technically, the church is also asking members not to eat two types of vegetables, namely tobacco and tea. And also, if you think back to the law of Moses, there's a lot of things that you should or should not eat in the law of Moses. So, I mean, this is kind of like easy mode. There's a lot more difficult challenges that the prophet could ask someone.
It depends on how constipated you are.
Yeah, good point. We do need fiber, dang it.
No more
Just ask
fiber
Jamie
for you, Joseph Smith.
Yeah, just as Jamie Lee Curtis. We all need fiber.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jared, you kind of asked about what if the prophet asks you to do something illegal or immoral? Those are easy. Veggies and coffee, I would consider that kind of easy. Let's talk about the medium things. What would you do if the prophet asked you to testify on his behalf in his disorderly person trial, which is what Joseph Smith asked Josiah Stoll to do? That's a little harder.
Yeah.
Or what would you do if the prophet asked you to lie in order to cover up his illicit relationships with young women less than half of his age? And he asked lots of ladies about to do that. Or finally, this is all in the medium category. What would you do if the prophet asked you to officiate a sham marriage / sealing of two sisters to himself in front of his duped wife, which is what Joseph Smith asked William Clayton to do?
Well, okay, but you're taking out some vital context here, in that his wife
want to marry.
Yeah,
them.
well, and his wife was going to be like a real asshole about it, oh, but you had sex with these two sisters without telling me.
That makes a difference.
I'm a prophet. Shut up.
Yeah.
It is over.
Yeah, those are a little harder. What do you think about those medium challenges, Morgan?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. Overall, he's asking a good question here, right? Like, where do you draw the line? Do you have a line? And essentially, he answers that in a way that I don't agree with.
He says there shouldn't be a line.
You shouldn't have a line, right? My line is gonna, and I think actually, I think Jared mentioned this yesterday when we discussed on the and well, anyway. If you don't know what your line is, you're going to pass it. And that's the scary thing. And so I think, he's asking good questions. I just don't like his answers.
Yeah, so if I'm putting my Mormon hat on, like going back to when I was very, very Mormon, if the prophet asked me to testify on his behalf in a disorderly conduct thing, I probably would have, because I'd be like, oh, they're probably lying about him or whatever.
Right.
But when he starts asking you things like to officiate a sham wedding, that would I'm really trying to put my head in this sort of I believe this to be true mind space, because that would really stretch it for me, especially if I knew that he was already technically quote unquote married to these girls.
Right. But, the scary thing, as I've just researched so many different cults, and La Luz del Mundo is one I've researched really heavily, and they have a massive sex scandal with their leader. It's their apostle. It's the equivalent of our prophet. And he was arrested and he got charged 16 years for, just horrible damage to children, human trafficking, just awful things that I don't know if I'm allowed to say on here. But essentially, they were all told that that their apostle deserved virgins, and that it made it not a sin. And these girls were brainwashed into having these relations with him because they didn't have a line drawn that they could say, wait a second, maybe if the prophet asks me to do this thing, maybe he's not a prophet, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me that whenever you got somebody that's like in ecclesiastical authority that's preaching so hard against sin, it's they get a free pass. It's not sin when they do it. When you got some sort of narcissist cult leader that's out there engaging in things that he's been very strictly against, oh well, it's not sin because it doesn't apply to that person.
Yeah. Right. I do like this blog, though, because he has a lot of blog posts that really go viral, and he has a lot of thought-provoking questions, and I kind of take this question kind of like a theoretical thought experiment. And we're only in the medium section, so let's take it up a notch and have a little bit more hard questions. What would you do if the prophet asked you to mortgage a large portion of your personal property and donate it to the church? Because that's what Martin Harris had to do. And by the way, he lost the mortgage and he lost that portion of his farm. That was a significant portion of his assets.
Oh, it ruined him, yeah.
Or what would you do if the prophet asked you to marry your 14-year-old daughter as his 25th secret wife? That's what Joseph Smith asked Heber Kimball to do. Now we're getting into the hard category.
Yes, we are.
I think even at my most Mormon, I might have mortgaged my farm. I don't know. I kind of hope not. I'm pretty certain. Obviously, everybody's capable of evil things. I'm pretty certain that I would say, no, you can't marry my daughter, and that disqualifies you from being a prophet. Go to hell. Goodbye.
Well, and in Heber Kimball's defense, he clearly really believed in Joseph Smith, and so if he thinks that this is, his daughter's salvation is resting on this marriage, and then obviously he's going to be really inclined to want to support it, even if he had reservations.
Yeah, it's really interesting to like look at the mindset and think, okay, well, in order to like, how do you justify this? Well, in order to justify it, because obviously the knee jerk reaction is no, right? But in order to try and justify it, you try looking back to other examples of what has been done, and like, okay, well, God did ask Abraham to sacrifice Isaac or something, just to give an example out there. So therefore, if God's going to, maybe that's what this is a test. And I think that Joseph Smith understood that, and he played on that a lot, especially as things went along and the polygamy became a real big deal.
Yeah, we're getting to the harder questions here. Now, let's get to the hardest questions that I could come up with. I don't know, maybe you have harder ones, but these are the hardest ones that I could find in all of the Holy Scriptures. What would you do if the prophet asked you as a soldier to withdraw in a battle so that a fellow brother in arms, we're talking about Uriah in the Old Testament, would be left for dead? And remember, David, he was considered a prophet by most people, and I think the Latter-day Saints would consider him to be a prophet. Would you do that?
This one's kind of funny because I'd like to hear what this Go-Go Goff's response to that would be, because when he says the prophet will never lead you astray, that's an example of, it's not just an example of, I personally think that David led these people astray by leaving Uriah to die to cover up for his own indiscretion, but it's the Bible itself frames him as having done the wrong thing in that instance.
Yeah.
And so that's a biblical example of the moral authority of the church absolutely leading somebody astray.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Dives? You're the military guy here. If suppose that, I mean, by equivalence, if you had like a 5-star general that had commanded you, hey, we're just going to have to leave them there. Pull back.
So as a soldier, if you're given a lawful order to withdraw, then you have to obey that lawful order, and that would be considered a lawful order. So from a general, you would have to follow that order. And if you think back to the times of the, the Civil War, people who refuse those type of orders, any type of order like that, they could be executed. So yes, as a soldier, yes, but as a human being, you're programmed to. One of the soldiers' creed says that we never leave a fallen comrade. So it's a very, very difficult question. That's why I put it in the hardest question.
Exactly.
Section.
Yeah, that is a really hard one.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to another harder. I'm trying to get to the hardest ones at the end. What would you do if the prophet asked you to chop off the head of a defenseless, unarmed, and unconscious man? And that was with Nephi and Laban in the Book of Mormon. Now, technically, a prophet did not ask Nephi to do that. He said it was the voice of the Lord. But still, what if Nephi had turned to you and said, "Hey, you were supposed to do that"? Would you do it?
Well, I mean, if a voice in your head tells you to kill someone, what else are you going to do?
Exactly, right?
Well, that's where the under banner of heaven came from.
Ignores that voice in his head, yeah.
That's exactly where we got the Under the Banner of Heaven series.
That's exactly where Crime of Punishment came from.
Yeah. In fact, the Lafferty specifically referenced Nephi and Laban in the Book of Mormon, talking about when they killed Brenda Lafferty. So yes, if you take things seriously, that would be a yes. Okay, let's keep going. I'm coming up to the hardest ones. Got 3 more. What would you do if the prophet asked you to kill your own son, as you referenced earlier, Jared? Now, that was technically Abraham, and that was an angel with his son Isaac. But still, what if Abraham had asked you to do that?
I mean, I hope I'd say no.
Yeah, veggies are easy.
I saw this on Top Pranked before God. I know what you're up to.
Yeah, these veggies are easy. These are harder. Now, the last 2 I have for you is, what would you do if the prophet asked you to summon bears to kill 42 children? Because that's what happened with Elijah in the Old Testament. Now, he did it himself, but still, what if he asked you to do it? And the most difficult question that I could think of, you tell me if I came up with the hardest one, was, what would you do if the prophet asked you to kill countless men, women, children, and innocent babies? That was with Saul and the Amalekites, and also Joshua with the Canaanites. Now, remember, Saul, he was technically a king, so he wasn't a prophet. But Joshua, he definitely was a prophet, and he said to wipe out the Canaanites. Those are a lot harder than vegetables.
Yeah, genocide's a little bit more than vegetables, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, going back to your point, Morgan, you said that the article was broken down into 3 separate categories. First, the prophet cannot lead us astray, and I was really thinking about that. I just thought of a couple of examples. Number one, we have Joseph Smith's translation of the Book of Abraham. Now, that is a small misleading of being led astray. Joseph Smith said that the figures and facsimiles and things represented certain things, and they do not. He said that certain characters represented certain images, birds, people, and they did not. But he definitely led us astray in the Book of Abraham. You might not think that it has much implication for our modern day, but that's definitely an example. You also have the Adam God theory, where Brigham Young, he taught that Adam was our God, but Spencer Kimball said, no, that's the theories of men. You also have the blood atonement. Brigham Young taught it, but it's been taken back. You also have blacks in the temple and the priesthood ban. Homosexuality being repeatedly and persistently taught as a curable personal evil choice for decades. You also have God as a spirit in the Lectures on Faith, which was quietly decanonized in 1921. It seems like we're seeing a lot of times where prophets have led us astray.
And polygamy, you could, people could go back and forth with that, because they'll say, "Oh, well, no, it was needed then, but not now." But there were several prophets that said it would always be foundational to getting to the celestial kingdom.
See, I've seen enough apologetics that I can think of the ways to squirm out of most of these, right? Because they can say that, well, people were just, they were wrong. It was like with blacks in the priesthood, they were just wrong. They were products of their time, and they maybe they wouldn't have listened to God.
People were racist.
I don't know. You can kind of try to squirm your way out of that one. The really difficult one to squirm out of, though, with as far as leading you astray, is the Adam God theory, because that's not just something that you say we were kind of wrong about. That's actually it's a direct teaching that most Mormons right now would consider blasphemy.
Yeah, and that's not something that should really change. The nature of God should be consistent. We're taught that God is the same from all time. So that one is one of the more difficult ones. And also in our modern day time frame, think about this. Gordon B. Hinckley, he said that the Defense of Marriage Act back in 1996, that was God's will. That's why we had Proposition 8, and the church was all hands on deck to overturn, make sure Proposition 8 was defeated. And now we have Russell M. Nelson in the last couple of weeks who said that it's God's will to repeal it, which is what the Marriage for All Act did. So you can try to weasel out of both of those, but it does really seem like we're two different planes there.
Yeah. So his whole answer in this article is the prophet can't lead us astray, but then we have all these examples, and you could steelman some of these by maybe saying God knew we weren't ready for certain information. God knew people were too racist, so he said that they're not gonna have the priesthood. But then but it's just some of these instances don't really make sense with that answer, things like blood atonement and things like that. It's just to me, for him to sit here and say, well, the prophet can't lead you astray. So if he says, don't eat your vegetables, then you better listen. But we have all of these really specific examples that say otherwise. And what that should make any member of any church, but especially the LDS church, think about is that perhaps it's possible that a prophet can lead you astray, and if that's the case, maybe you should pay closer attention to what he's asking you to do.
Yeah, I think that makes me think of it. It always just feels like setting up a monarchy as a valid form of a valid system of checks and balances. The king will never overstep his powers, because the king will make sure that doesn't happen.
Because he's the king, right?
Yeah, so we should be a monarchy. Nobody has as much power as this guy to check him, but he'll check himself, I'm sure.
Yeah. I find what's really amusing about this whole study is that they're using something as simple as vegetables, okay? But the message from the pulpit keeps coming, oh, this is the generation that's the most valiant of all generations. The Lord has saved his most righteous and his most stalwart and his strongest spirits to come down in the last days. And yet we're being faced by really easy questions like that. Okay, if the prophet's going to ask you to do something like stop eating your vegetables, oh, you don't like eating broccoli? Well, if the Lord tells the prophet to tell you to stop eating broccoli, are you going to stop eating it? Well, yeah, but
as long as he doesn't stop telling me to drink Monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not getting asked. Okay, so are you? I mean, when I was in seminary and during Gordon Binkley's years, it was like, okay, well, if the prophet asks you to commit suicide and take your own life or take the lives of your family with you, if he commands you, are you going to do it? I mean, that was the kind of questions that we were asked. So giving up vegetables seems like a big step back.
Have some balls, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeremy.
Off, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, his second point in the article is that fallen prophets are false doctrine. He seems to be making the argument that there's no such thing as fallen prophets. But if you look back through the scriptures, we can find lots of examples. We already talked about David in the Old Testament. He basically killed Uriah and he slept with Bathsheba. If that's not fallen, I'm not sure what is. Jonah, he ran away from the Lord's commandments. I don't know if you want to call it the God told Jonah to do something. He did the exact opposite. I thought he couldn't lead people astray, and then he seems pretty fallen to me. You also have a very obvious example of Judas in the New Testament. If he's not a fallen prophet, I really, betraying Jesus, I don't know how you can say that Judas wasn't a fallen prophet.
Well, apostles are considered prophets, seers, and revelators themselves, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Well, people are going to say, well, that's in the old times. That's all in the Bible. Where the new, the stone has been established or cut out of the mountain, and it's not going to happen again. Well, if you think about how many apostles have been in this dispensation since the first apostles were commissioned in 1835, they were chosen by the three witnesses. There's been 105 total apostles in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and 12 of them have been excommunicated. 12.
Wow.
And these are some of the highest people, not just low-level apostles. So we're talking about Thomas Marsh. He was the president of the Quorum of the 12, and he was excommunicated in 1839. Sidney Rigdon was in the first presidency. He was excommunicated. William Law, he was the second counselor in the first presidency. He was excommunicated. John C. Bennett was technically the assistant president of the church. He was the number 2 in line. He was excommunicated. And Oliver Cowdery, who's probably one of the most important people in the Restoration, he was the second elder in the church. This was before they founded the 12 apostles. He was excommunicated. So the idea that there's no fallen prophets, that's just, I don't know how you can make that argument.
Well, we've kind of forgotten that because I think the last apostle to be excommunicated was back in about 1840. Is that right?
No, 1940.
That's right, 1940, yeah.
Yeah, Lyman was excommunicated for adultery in 1940.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of ancient history, but, I mean, ancient history, that's World War II. It's not that ancient. This is like our grandparents' time period. So, well, I mean...
It's clearly evidence that, prophets can fall, which leads us to the conclusion that means the current prophets could fall as well. And I think that that's something that Mormonism... kind of, I don't know, they set their members up to fail essentially because you have these members that have this blind loyalty, which just says that, it doesn't matter if I agree with what he's saying or not. I just, he cannot, it's not possible that he can lead me astray. It's a very comforting thought, right? Yeah. Because you have this moral framework and it's going to keep you safe from doing the wrong thing. This person is never going to lead you astray. It's very comfortable. And it's also very easy to just rely on that as being true. Yeah. And sometimes we can allow things to be true in our mind simply because we want them to be true. And because it's such a comforting idea, we want it to be true. But ultimately, this is a lot of evidence to suggest otherwise. And like Jared said, I'd be curious to hear Jeremy's response to these examples.
I guarantee you, if you follow the prophet and commit a crime, and you try to implicate the prophet, saying, "Well, he told me to to murder my son,"
nah, dog.
Curtin McConkie will have some very interesting things to say about personal accountability in the courtroom. I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's. That goes along with our poll of the week here. On our poll of the week, you can. It's available only on Anchor, but if you come on over to Anchor, you can interact with us. And what is the poll of the week this week that goes along with this article, Al?
Okay, so the question this week is, what would you do if the prophet asked you to stop eating vegetables?
Okay, is it number 1?
Am I reading this or Jared?
No, I was hoping Morgan or Jared. Okay. Morgan or Jared? Is it number 1?
No problem. I already follow a strict diet consisting only of BYU Creamery ice cream.
That sounds good. I like that.
A little hard on the arteries, but okay.
I like that. That sounds like a good diet, by the way. I may need to try that. Or Morgan, is it number 2?
Yes, number 2 answer on the poll is not sure. I would really need to pray about it first, or at least consult with a rock and a hat.
Yeah. I've never tried the rock and a hat.
Very reliable, I've heard.
I've heard that. I've never tried it. I don't know if any of you have tried that. Does that work better than prayer or about the same?
I mean, it's translated entire books of religious texts, so it's got to work really well, right?
It's got to be the right kind of rock. You got to make sure it's one of those ones that they use for the treasure digging. Those ones work really well. They don't find treasure, but they translate really well.
Yes, it's helpful to get it out of your neighbor's well and then borrow it from him and then refuse to return it. That's the best kind of rock if you can get that kind. Or is it, Jared, number 3?
No sweat. As long as I can still drink 96 ounces of Mountain Dew every day, I'll be just fine.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of people who follow that as well. I'm not sure about that.
But they're not addicted.
No.
Diet.
No, they not going to drink 1 cup of coffee, but 96 ounces of Mountain Dew, no problem.
Yeah.
Or how about number 4? Morgan, is it number 4?
Not going to happen. Jesus cursed disobedient fruit in the Bible, not vegetables.
Good point. Good
Jesus
point.
only hates figs. Yeah.
That's right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Or the Westboro Baptist Church, they mistranslated it. It's God hates figs.
Oh, no. That's good. That's funny. That's good. Oh, boy. It does appear that God is not a big fan of figs if they're not towing the line, though. I think we can safely say that. Or is it number 5?
Unless they update the official General Handbook of Instruction, I ain't doing nothing. It's a very bureaucratic religion.
Yes.
Yeah. What do they have? Clause 2A.
Yeah, the handbook's up to 500 pages, so it's a nice light reading. I read it every single night. I try to get through it once a week myself. But
yeah, I gotta keep it under your pillow. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Or Morgan, is it number 6?
I'm all in. My second cousin's sister-in-law's home teacher's patriarchal blessing said this day would finally come.
I've heard that before. That does make a lot of sense. Or finally, is the last option here, Jared, is number 7.
Sorry, I only follow what Desnat tells me about Hollow Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So which one of these, Morgan, this is an imperfect poll, but what would be the closest to your answer for what would you do if the prophet asked you to stop eating vegetables? You've got 7 choices here. Which one best represents your feelings?
Probably the rock and the hat. I would really need to consult with that first.
And Jared, which one for you?
I'd probably do number 3. I'm a fat piece of shit.
Okay, no sweat. It doesn't bother you one bit. Gotcha. No problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Taco Bell vegetables?
It doesn't include refried beans, right?
Now, we have some big shows. That's all the news for this week, but we have a big shows coming up here. I just want to run down our lineup that's coming up. We have a very special show lined up for next week with not 1, but 2 special guests where we were going to review the top 10 Mormon stories of the year. And we also, Morgan, we recorded a special episode for My Spiritual Life, right?
Yeah, hell yeah, we did. I'm really excited to release that. It'll be either on Christmas or after. And I'm even making like a mini version of it too for people that want to get the recap but don't want to, listen to us chat for so long. So I'm making like a 6-minute version, so that'll be cool too.
Nice.
Very nice. And also for January 1st, we have Rebecca Biblioteca from the Good Book Club, who's our first regular guest host. She's coming on. We also have a tentative agreement from Emily from the Dissident Daughters podcast. She's coming on January 8th. We've heard the Midnight Mormons. I'm getting some, they might be coming on in January. Not sure how many of them, but we have lots of other big shows and guests in the works.
Yep, we're really excited about that. So I think I'll wrap it up for us today. I want to give a quick shout out to Weird Alma for this episode's music and every episode's music. We really appreciate him working with us. Thank you so much for ruminating with us on the Great and Spacious Beehive. And remember, no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing. Thank you very much, Morgan and Jared, for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan, Satan, Satan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a being with no moral constraints. My number one goal is to hurt the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.